The rain came in sheets, turning the glass windows of the small cafe into blurred watercolor. Jungkook stood behind the counter, towel in hand, drying the last coffee cup of the night. It was past 11, and the streets outside were mostly empty, except for the occasional passing car slicing through the puddles. His shift always felt quieter when it rained, but tonight, the stillness seemed heavier. He tugged at the sleeves of his oversized sweater, yawning softly. The chime above the cafe door rang. Jungkook glanced up, and the air shifted. The man who walked in didn't belong here, not with his long black coat dripping with rain, his gloves, or the faint metallic scent that Jungkook thought, absurdly, might be blood. Dark hair fell in perfect disarray over sharp eyes that scanned the cafe like he was assessing a threat. Jungkook froze mid-step, unsure if he should greet him or hide. The stranger's gaze locked on him, unreadable, before he strode to the counter. His voice, low and velvety, broke the silence. Black coffee, extra strong. Right away. Jungkook's fingers fumbled with the coffee machine, aware of the weight of that gaze still on him. The man didn't take a seat. He stood at the counter, hands resting on the polished wood, watching. Jungkook could feel his pulse in his ears. He wasn't used to customers staring like that. And yet, curiosity prickled through his nerves. Who came and dressed like that on a night like this? He slid the coffee toward him. Here you go. The man took a slow sip, eyes narrowing slightly as if in approval. You work here alone? Jungkook hesitated. Most nights, yeah. A ghost of a smile flickered on the man's lips. Brave. Before Jungkook could respond, he turned and walked toward a corner table, settling into the shadows like they were made for him. For the next half hour, Jungkook worked quietly, stealing quick glances when he thought it was safe. The man didn't check his phone, didn't read, just sipped coffee and stared out the window, his reflection fractured by the rain. By the time Jungkook locked up, the cafe was empty. He stepped outside, pulling his hood up against the rain, and started toward the bus stop. Hey there, pretty boy. Jungkook stiffened. 3 men emerged from the alley, the smell of alcohol hitting him before their slurred words did. One blocked his path, another grinned like a predator. We've seen you here before, one sneered. Why don't you keep us company? Jungkook took a step back. I'm going home. Don't be shy. The voice cut through the rain like a blade. Move. The drunk men froze. Behind them, the man from the cafe stood under the dim streetlight, coat collar turned up, eyes like polished obsidian. Who the hell are you? One of them barked. He didn't answer. He just walked forward, unhurried. The look in his eyes was enough, the kind that promised violence without needing to raise a hand. The men exchanged glances, curses spilling from their lips as they backed away and vanished into the shadows. Jungkook swallowed hard. The stranger stopped in front of him, the rain dripping from his hair, his coat smelling faintly of smoke and something dangerous. You shouldn't walk alone at this hour, he said quietly. Thank you. His gaze lingered for a moment, as if weighing something unspoken. Go home, Jungkook. The sound of his name made Jungkook's breath catch. He hadn't told him that. Before he could ask, the man turned, disappearing into the rain the way he'd appeared, silent, controlled, untouchable. That night, lying in bed, Jungkook replayed the encounter over and over. The eyes, the voice, the strange way his name had sounded on his lips. He should have been afraid. But instead, he found himself wondering when he'd see him again. It started happening more often. Jungkook would glance up from wiping tables or refilling cups, and there he'd be, the man from that rainy night, sitting in the same corner booth, black coat draped over the seat beside him. Always at odd hours, always alone. At first, Jungkook thought it was coincidence. But coincidences didn't happen 3 nights in a row. Another black coffee? Jungkook asked one evening, setting the cup in front of him. The man's eyes flicked to his knee tag before meeting his gaze. Taehyung. Jungkook blinked. What? My name, he said simply, fingers curling around the mug. Since you keep looking at me like you want to ask. Heat crept up Jungkook's neck. I was just wondering why you only ever come here when it's almost midnight. Don't you sleep? One corner of Taehyung's mouth lifted, the first hint of a smile Jungkook had seen on him. Not when the city's awake. It was the kind of answer that didn't explain anything, yet somehow made Jungkook want to know more. By the end of the week, whispers began circling around campus. You know the guy from the cafe? The tall one with black hair, a classmate whispered to Jungkook. Someone's seen him following you after your shifts. Jungkook forced a laugh, brushing it off, but the words stuck in his mind. Was Taehyung watching him? The thought should have been unsettling. Instead, it left a strange flutter in his chest, part fear, part curiosity. It was late on a Thursday when the first real danger came. The cafe was dark, its door locked behind him. Jungkook tugged his hood up and started down the narrow side street toward the bus stop. Halfway there, shadows peeled away from the brick walls, 3 men, faces half hidden, grinning in a way that made Jungkook's stomach twist. Well, one said. You're the kid the boss has been talking about. Jungkook froze. I think you have the wrong. Don't play dumb. Another stepped closer, a glint of metal in his hand. Before Jungkook could run, a voice cut through the alley. Wrong street to die in. The men turned. Taehyung stood at the mouth of the alley, his coat open just enough to reveal the glint of a holstered gun. He didn't raise it, he didn't need to. His presence alone was enough. The gang members exchanged tense looks. One muttered a curse under his breath before they scattered into the darkness. Jungkook exhaled shakily, realizing he'd been holding his breath. You followed me? I told you not to walk alone, Taehyung said, stepping closer. I don't need a babysitter, Jungkook shot back, though his voice trembled. A sudden crack split the air of gunfire, distant but close enough to make Jungkook flinch. Taehyung's reaction was instant. He closed the space between them, one hand gripping Jungkook's arm, the other braced against the wall behind him, caging him in. The hard planes of his chest pressed lightly against Jungkook's as his body shielded him from the street. Jungkook could smell the faint mix of gunpowder and clean leather clinging to him. Stay still, Taehyung murmured, his voice low enough that Jungkook felt it more than heard it. The gunshots echoed once more before fading into the night. Taehyung didn't move immediately. His head was tilted slightly, scanning the shadows beyond Jungkook's shoulder, every muscle coiled like a predator waiting to strike. When he finally stepped back, his eyes locked on Jungkook's. You shouldn't be near me, he said, voice like gravel. Jungkook swallowed. Then, why are you? Taehyung's gaze softened almost imperceptibly. Because I'm not letting you out of my sight. Before Jungkook could respond, Taehyung turned and started walking. His tone wasn't a request when he said, come on, I'll take you home. And Jungkook, despite every voice in his head telling him to keep his distance, followed. For 3 days, Jungkook avoided the cafe. He told himself it was because of his workload, but deep down, he knew the truth. Every time he thought of Taehyung, the way his body had shielded him in that alley, the gravel in his voice when he'd said, I'm not letting you out of my sight, his heart pounded in a way he couldn't control. It wasn't fear. That was the problem. On the fourth day, he thought he was safe. Campus was crowded, the afternoon sun spilling through the glass halls. He was halfway to his next class when a shadow fell across his path. "You've been avoiding me." Jungkook froze. Taehyung stood there, dressed in black from collar to boots, his presence somehow darker in the bright daylight. "I've been busy," Jungkook muttered, trying to step around him. Taehyung's hand shot out, lightly catching his wrist. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. The lecture hall was empty, their footsteps echoing as they stepped inside. Jungkook dropped his bag onto a seat, crossing his arms. "You can't keep showing up everywhere I go," he said, though it came out weaker than he intended. "I can't." Taehyung's tone was unreadable, but his eyes softened just slightly. He leaned against the desk, hands braced on either side. "You think I like following you around for no reason?" Jungkook looked away. "Then why?" Silence stretched between them until Taehyung's voice dropped, lower and quieter. "Because I don't want you to see me for what I am. A monster. A man who's done things you can't even imagine. I should let you walk away," but his jaw tightened. "I can't." Jungkook's chest ached. "I'm not scared of you." Taehyung's gaze snapped to him. "I'm scared of losing you," Jungkook admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, neither moved. The air felt thick, almost fragile. Then Taehyung stepped forward. His eyes dropped to Jungkook's mouth, lingering just a second too long. "You've got something here." Before Jungkook could ask, Taehyung's thumb brushed the corner of his lip, a slow, deliberate touch that sent heat rushing to his cheeks. Jungkook's breath hitched. "It's just coffee cream." "I know." That night, danger found him again. He'd stayed late at the library, and on his walk home, a van screeched to a stop beside him. Hands grabbed him before he could scream, the rough pull of strangers dragging him toward the open door. Gunfire cracked through the night, shouts, curses, the thud of bodies hitting pavement. Taehyung's men swarmed, pulling him free before he could process what had happened. By the time his shaking stopped, he was sitting in the back of a sleek black car. Taehyung was in the front seat, voice like ice as he barked orders into a phone. "You're staying with me tonight," he said without turning around. Jungkook wanted to argue, but the memory of rough hands still lingered on his skin. He stayed quiet. The penthouse was nothing like he expected. Modern, spacious, the city skyline glittering through floor-to-ceiling windows. But what caught his attention wasn't the wealth, it was the faint warmth in the way Taehyung had left a blanket folded neatly on the couch, a half-read book on the coffee table. "Bathrooms down the hall," Taehyung said, tossing him a plain black shirt. "It'll be more comfortable than what you're wearing." Jungkook took it, fingers brushing Taehyung's for the briefest moment. It was nothing, just a passing touch, but it felt charged, like the air between them shifted. Later, when he patted out in the oversized shirt, Taehyung was waiting with a glass of water. Their hands touched again as it changed ownership, a deliberate slowness neither acknowledged. "Get some sleep," Taehyung said, his gaze holding Jungkook's a beat too long before looking away. Jungkook crawled into the guest bed, the faint scent of Taehyung's cologne clinging to the shirt, lulling him into uneasy dreams. And somewhere in the quiet, he realized the line between fear and desire had blurred completely. Weeks turned into a rhythm neither of them had intended. spend more evenings at Taehyung's penthouse, though he never called it staying over. Sometimes, Taehyung would come home late from meetings and Jungkook would already be there, curled up on the leather couch with his laptop and textbooks. Other nights, Taehyung would let Jungkook sit in his office while he worked. The faint sound of paper shuffling, the muted click of a gun being reloaded, and Jungkook's pen scribbling notes somehow blended into a quiet harmony. Their worlds shouldn't have fit together, yet in those moments, they did. The first kiss came unexpectedly. It was after a tense night, a sit-down with rival leaders that nearly ended in bloodshed. Taehyung's jaw was tight as he gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. Jungkook watched him from the passenger seat, chest aching at the sight of that controlled fury. Before he could overthink it, he leaned forward, catching Taehyung's chin in his hand and pressing their lips together. Taehyung froze, then exhaled against his mouth, the kiss deepening slowly, like he was memorizing the shape of Jungkook's lips. When they pulled back, Taehyung's eyes were darker, his voice low. "You don't know what you do to me." It was 2 weeks later when everything shifted again. An ambush had gone wrong. Taehyung came home with blood, not his, on his hands and a bruise blooming along his jaw. Jungkook found him standing in the kitchen, gripping the counter like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Without a word, Jungkook stepped close, his hands sliding over Taehyung's tense shoulders. "You're safe now." Taehyung's control cracked. He pulled Jungkook in, mouth finding his with a hunger edged in desperation. Clothes were shed between breaths, and the way Taehyung touched him that night was different, slower, almost reverent, as if Jungkook was something fragile he might lose. Jungkook clung to him, feeling every unspoken word in the press of their bodies. When they finally collapsed together, tangled in sweat and warmth, Taehyung whispered into his hair, "You're mine, no matter what happens." The city outside didn't matter. For a few hours, nothing did. Time blurred again. Days turned into weeks until one morning, Jungkook woke feeling off. Nausea, fatigue, a strange heaviness in his body. At first, he blamed stress. But when the symptoms didn't fade, he found himself in a small clinic on the edge of town. The doctor's words rang in his ears long after he left. Pregnant. Jungkook sat in the waiting room for nearly an hour afterward, his hands trembling. It wasn't supposed to be possible, not for him. And yet, here he was, carrying the child of a man whose life was built on blood and shadows. That night, he told Taehyung. At first, there was silence. Taehyung just stared, eyes unreadable, as if he hadn't heard him correctly. Then his hands curled into fists. "Do you have any idea what this means?" His voice was low but dangerous, not in threat, but in fear. Jungkook's throat tightened. "I thought you'd be happy." Taehyung stepped closer, cupping his face with trembling hands. "Happy? Jungkook, I've killed men for looking at you the wrong way. If they find out you're carrying my child," his voice broke for the first time, "I can't protect you from all of them. Not always." Jungkook swallowed hard. "Then we'll be careful." "Will." No, the word was final, a blade between them. "You're leaving the city." Jungkook felt like the ground shifted beneath him. "You're sending me away?" Taehyung's eyes closed briefly. "It's the only way you'll be safe. I'll settle things here, then I'll come for you." The air between them thickened with unsaid pleas. Jungkook wanted to scream, to demand that he stay, but the way Taehyung's hands lingered on his face told him this wasn't a choice Taehyung wanted to make. When Taehyung finally let go, It felt like tearing something vital from both of them. And for the first time since they'd met, Jungkook wondered if love was enough to survive the world Taehyung lived in. The war ended quietly. At least, that's how the papers framed it. A small column buried in the crime section spoke of gang restructuring and peaceful agreements, as if blood hadn't soaked the alleys for months. Jungkook didn't read the article. He had long stopped looking for news of Taehyung. Some nights, he told himself it was because he didn't want to know. Other nights, he admitted the truth, knowing would make the ache sharper. It was late autumn in the quiet seaside town where he'd built his exile. The bookstore where he worked always smelled faintly of rain-soaked paper, the kind of scent that made people linger. Without realizing how much of it was exhaustion. Jungkook's belly had grown round and heavy, his movements slower. He didn't mind. The quiet was safe, and the baby's soft kicks under his hand reminded him that not all parts of his old life were gone. Still, at night, when the wind rattled the windows, he would curl under his blanket and imagine a familiar deep voice telling him it was all over, that it was safe to come home. The bell above the shop door rang just as he was locking up. Jungkook turned, ready to tell whoever it was they were closed, and froze. Taehyung stood there, rain dripping from his hair, blood staining his shirt in jagged streaks. His shoulders were hunched as if the weight of the world was still on him. But his eyes were the same as the night they parted. Taehyung, Jungkook breathed, the name trembling on his lips. "I'm done hiding," Taehyung said, voice low but steady. "If you'll still have me." It was ridiculous. After all these months, Jungkook's first instinct was to reach for him. His hands pressed against Taehyung's chest, feeling the rapid thud of his heart. You left me," Jungkook whispered, and the crack in his voice was enough to undo them both. Taehyung's arms came around him, holding him tight, one hand cradling the back of his head. "I thought I was keeping you safe. Every day without you, it was worse than anything they could do to me." Jungkook's tears soaked into Taehyung's shirt. "I hated you," he admitted, his voice shaking. "And I missed you so much I thought I'd break." Taehyung drew back just enough to see him, then sank to one knee. His palm rested gently over the swell of Jungkook's stomach, and for the first time in months, his face softened completely. "Hey," he murmured, as if speaking to the child. "It's me. I'm here now." Jungkook's fingers threaded through his damp hair, pulling him close until Taehyung's lips brushed the curve of his stomach. The gesture was so tender it burned. They didn't talk much that night. Taehyung insisted on driving him home, refusing to leave his side. The rain followed them, pattering against the windows as Jungkook made tea in the kitchen and Taehyung stood behind him, arms wrapped around his waist, nose buried in his shoulder. There would be time later for explanations. For all the details of the war, the deals made, the bodies buried. But for now, the only truth that mattered was that they were together again. The private clinic was quiet except for the sound of rain against the roof. Jungkook's breath came in short, pained bursts, his fingers gripping Taehyung's hand so tightly it hurt. "You're almost there," the doctor said softly, but Jungkook barely heard them. His focus was on Taehyung's voice, low and steady in his ear. "I've got you. You're doing so well. Just a little more love." When the baby's first cry filled the room, Jungkook's chest cracked open with relief. He sobbed, exhausted, as Taehyung kissed the crown of his head and whispered, "No more shadows. Only us." Taehyung cradled their child, tiny, red-faced, and impossibly small in his large hands, before placing the baby gently in Jungkook's arms. The world outside could keep its storms. Here, in this moment, they had their own quiet sky. And this time, Taehyung wasn't letting go.